This whole show is about a conversation and a series of conversations. And so I like to let the wood itself be part of the conversation. Mm-hmm. For some reason, I have this need to reinvent everything almost from scratch on every project. That means you have to learn a whole brand new skill set. It's so fun sort of to be humbled. Mm-hmm. And I think artists need to have that humbling experience.
I guess let's just start with this new body of work. How did you get here? You know, like I know that, you know, making is often like kind of this linear thread where one show leads to another, one body of work. Is this a continuation of something recently, or is this something that you're drawing back from?
I've been a painter for the last 30 years and always a woodworker. And ever since grad school, which was not particularly successful for painters, believe it or not, at Davis, I was really interested in, not like Seurat, but that surface of image. Mm-hmm. And I kept on saying, how can I get a surface of a painting to be like what I see? And so when Natalie brought up the idea of a show, I thought, ooh, well, first of all, what would it be like if you walked into the gallery and the gallery was empty? So that's the first idea, was to line the entire gallery with scrim. So when you walk in, it would appear to be empty, but then there would be these objects floating in the darkness behind the scrim.
Interesting.
Yeah, and each one would be spotlit. So you wouldn't, so I was trying to push that combination between what is an object and what is the image of an object, because you won't be able to get to these objects because you're looking through the scrim, which to a degree I hope is going to be what I've been trying to do in my paintings, which is to create that surface of sight between you and the object.
Yeah, interesting.
And then one thing led to another. Unfortunately, my brother-in-law, who was a vet, lived way the hell out in Eastern Oregon, died. And my wife and her sister went up and got, cleaned out his stuff and threw a bunch of stuff in the back of the truck and got his old firewood and threw it on top of the tarp to keep things from flying away on the freeway on the way back down. I said, look at this beautiful material, and it was also kind of encapsulating this guy who I didn't know particularly well, but he was really out in the woods. And my studio here is out here in the country, so I said, what a nice materials, how can I, and that's what artists do, is transform materials into objects. And then I just thought I would take the math one step further, material into an object, then object into an image, and see what that relationship can be. And then I build light fixtures for each piece. So each piece is going to have its own light fixture, and each light fixture will have a dimmer on it. So I'll be able to calibrate exactly how visible these objects are. And that was the idea. And then the rest is just fun and pain.
Yeah.
As as a sculptor. And I'm tooled up. I mean, I've been a furniture maker for my entire adult life, ever since I was a kid. So I have all the tools and I have the knowledge, and it's just really nice to have this knowledge be appropriated to the good side.
I think, kind of leading off of that, choosing a material, this is something I've been wanting to ask you is, generally coming from a fine woodworking background, you're using, you're going to a hardwood store and you're getting nice material to start with. And this is dealing with firewood, which is pretty unpredictable because you don't know what the grain's going to do or how it's going to react. And so I guess two questions there. One, knowing your work from the past, generally you have a concept that's almost fully fleshed out, right? Like this is what you're going to make, and then you fabricate to get there. Where this process seems very much intuitive to me, where you're having to sort of let the firewood tell you where it wants to go, you know? And so maybe you could talk about that, what that process has been like, and also what it's been like not necessarily knowing the finished concept while you're working.
Yeah, that's a good, it brings up a couple of points in the fact that as a sculptor, I've always hated wood sculpture. The more organic it becomes, it seems more like driftwood sculpture. You know, put a piece of plywood on top and make it into a table. I'm not interested in that relationship of the organic to the finish. Sure. But as a material based, and you're right, so I usually tend to completely control everything. But this whole show is about a conversation and a series of conversations. And so I like to let the wood itself be part of the conversation. And so there's some pieces over there which are still firewood on top, and but this kind of imposed. These are vases my grandmother had for her flowers, and so I wanted to make these kind of late Victorian vases, and those, you know, would be like a vase of flowers, but there's still the firewood on top. And a lot of the firewood's rotted. You got that part right. So those conversations you're talking about, you're having a conversation with the material, and then the audience is going to be having a conversation with the work. Is there any other conversations going on? Oh yeah, each one is concept based. It's a very interesting time we're living through. You know, this year. Absolutely. You know, I guess in a certain way, even though it's not been the best year for really getting a lot of work done, as a human, you can't help but be affected by what's going on. And the concept of firewood came before the fires. The concept of these relationships came before the distancing. But, for example, this is this image that I've had in my head of Noah's Ark, and how Noah's Ark was built on the scaffolding and waiting for the waters to rise and carry the ark away. And I've always kind of loved that as an image, let alone as a concept. So I thought I would build that as part of my literature. But this is me when I was 14. You know, if you're going to be an artist, you might as well be autobiographical. Absolutely. And the idea of a Mobius strip, I just fell in love with that concept of a shape that only has one side. You know, because you can trace your finger around and never pick it up, and it'll meet again. And I had no idea how hard this was to actually make. Can I see that? Yeah. Goodness. And you can see the voids and stuff. Yeah, working with firewood, this is giving yourself a real challenge here. It's full. Beautiful, Chris. It's full of, you know, wormholes. And stuff like that. But is it freeing? There's got to be something freeing about, like, you're making these objects, but at the end of the day, they're going to be veiled. Is that a freeing process while you're making them, or do you not think about it? Because at the end of the day, these are sort of props to cast light and shadow. Right, and to capture light and shadow. I mean, they're beautiful objects in themselves, but their purpose is to create those. Yeah, not really. Not. You have to try within. I essentially establish a gesture. I establish how fast I'm going to be working and how smooth I want these pieces to be. And you stay true to that original gesture. And I want them to be fairly workmanlike, you know, not fetish finish or highly polished. Which you make fun of me. Yes. But I want them to be. It is funny. I want them to be tactile and pleasing to the hand, even though no one's going to touch them. They are. Like when I hold this, it's, or even the way you were describing that. You know, it's very much about touch. And I think as sculptors, we're often robbed of viewing work through touch. Well, that's funny, but sculpture. I mean, you're never supposed to touch a painting. That's true. But sculpture being such a physical material. And so, since a lot of these are meant to both capture light, but I'm getting back to the idea of what does this look like as an image.
Mhm.
And so the veiling is not so much of stopping touch
Mhm.
as much as removing the physicality of it.
Yeah.
And what's left, because the scrim is almost transparent.
Mhm.
And the other thing is these conversations with dead artists.
Yeah.
You know, Morandi here. Morandi fell under the sway of the surrealists, especially De Chirico when he was in his early 20s,
Mhm.
and did these great, ungainly, impossible paintings
Mhm.
of trying to be somewhat surrealistic and realistic at the same time.
Mhm.
And I just loved that attempt. And so I made a Morandi sculpture,
That's awesome.
which is going to turn into a painting, because I'm planning on painting a lot of these.
So you'll have another series of work.
Works
Yes.
based on these.
Mhm.
And then Natalie pointed out that those 3 vases ended up looking like a Morandi because they're all so much the same height. I love the way that he enforced a plane on top of everything. Everything only goes up so high, and that's it.
Mhm.
And so I said, oh, gee, I have 2 Morandis then. So it's funny how things kind of creep into your mind.
Always. I think I want to touch back on the material for a second. Because we've never had this discussion about the work or the materials themselves being like a conversation for you. Obviously, pulling this from your brother-in-law's firewood pile, and that's something for my own work that I'm always trying to draw the materials themselves from sources that I'm having a conversation with. And so is that something new to you, or is that something that you've done in work past?
It is. It's very new.
Yeah.
You know, that concept
Mm-hmm.
of it, of the wood itself having a history beyond just the history of it being wood.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I kind of ran out of some, and this is all pine. It burns, and I bought my mother some half cord of firewood for her house, and it was half pine and half almond. So they were going to use the pine for kindling. So I went down and I snagged a bunch of pine out of my mother's firewood
That's
pile.
awesome.
And
Because
so
you needed some more.
I needed some more, and the fact that all of it has a history.
Yeah.
And it's not that I'm holding that tight, and it's not really part of the narrative.
Yeah.
But for me, it makes working with the material. Again, it's as a sculptor, as an artist, but being able to hold this material that someone else has held is a really nice thing. And I try not to abuse. I don't force it into a form like some people that it wouldn't naturally take. But
it is a wrestling match.
Yeah. So this is, and also the use of tools. You know, there's a lot of machine tools I use. I have them all. There's these are made on a lathe. For example, the birdhouse there was made entirely with a hatchet.
Yeah.
I just got wood and I split it on that stump down there with this hatchet, and the 2 pieces of firewood were 2 different lengths, and so that's what created the shape of the house. So it's just that subtle transformation, which as artists always do, I think.
It sounds really freeing to be able to just make a sculpture with a hatchet.
It is really, really fun.
Yeah. I want to touch back on, I think that's a really, really fascinating, the show, I can't wait to see it.
Me too.
And I cannot wait to experience that visual wrestling match, really, because it's going to be that push-pull of being able to see through. You're going to have the layer of the surface with the light and shadow, and then the mystery of kind of being able to see what's behind.
Right.
And when I started thinking about this work, it really reminded me of the wrestling match, way back when your work from grad school, because the rust on those pieces has become, exposing those images onto metal, and then the rust has become that sort of veil.
Yeah.
And do you see a connection between those two?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
What he's talking about is that I had an ongoing conversation with a visiting adjunct professor when I was a grad student, and I did not particularly care for his style. And we argued back and forth, and he was big, and I was big. So I said, let's just get it over with. And so we had a wrestling match. And I put up a sheet, and it was backlit, and we just went at it.
So you were behind the sheet when you wrestled. So that's similar to what you're doing
Exactly.
now. Yeah.
And so it was a shadow play.
Mm-hmm.
And it was 3 falls out of 5. And I found out that a single layer of rug padding is not adequate for that. But then I screen printed them onto steel, brand new steel, and I've left them outside for 30 years. And now the rust is taking over the image. People seeing this, we're so used to seeing mediated images that we don't pay attention to the fact that if anybody's seeing this video, then they're looking through another scrim. They're looking through the scrim of the video. They're looking through the scrim of the camera, of the interface between the camera and the image and our conversation. By the time they actually see it on their phones, it'll have gone through 4 layers of transformation already. And we've been so trained that that's real. I wanted in that piece and in these pieces to bring that surface to the foreground. I think it's interesting, if not important, for viewers to be aware of their own observation. That's what I've always been trying to do. Say, oh, look at yourself looking at this. You know, what is the nature of this experience? Which is something I wanted to bring up with you, being since you present these objects, but you also present, you know, moving images. You know, is it important at all to create an environment where people are aware of that they're in an experience? It's really hard. When you think of a painting, you think of a painting as nothing but an image.
Yeah.
I've always wanted my paintings to be much more experiential, where that difficulty of looking makes you aware of your own powers of perception. And so this is another extension of that. Of people, I want them to be aware of themselves. Because no 2 people see things the same way. You know, it's great when I teach color, for example, or painting. I have the beautiful Japanese color blindness tests that I spent good money on. And all my students take a color blindness test, and no 2 people see the same way. No 2 people. And so why would you expect something to be uniform when it's being picked up by everybody? So I just want people to be aware of that they are they're the creators.
I've never, so I absolutely think about experience, and that's what I'm always trying to, like, yes, I'm presenting these objects, I make sculpture, but at the end of the day, I think one of the reasons that I work with so much scale and also have so many sensory things happening with sound and motion and all that is I'm trying to create an experience. I want the viewer to at least have a moment of getting lost in the work, you know, where they are present. And I think being present is such a difficult thing these days with so much technology, and it's like constantly, you know, pulling us into these virtual spaces that I'm just like hoping that somebody will have a real experience. And I guess for me, I don't expect anyone to have the same experience or the experience that I have. So it's sort of like, you know, you're thinking about it in terms of perception, and I'm thinking about it in terms of experience. But I'm just hoping they'll have something, right?
Like, for some reason, I have this need to reinvent everything almost from scratch on every project. Good friend Toria Cummings, she just says, I'm a project-oriented artist.
That's a good description.
And so she creates one project at a time. And that means you have to learn a whole brand new skill set for everything. But again, hopefully, it'll keep me going. You know, because the main thing is you spend a lot of time by yourself in a room like this. And where does the entertainment come from? And just that challenge of, I had no idea it was going to be so hard. This stupid little thing, I can't imagine anything simpler as a form to try to make as a paper airplane. You know, everybody knows this shape. You know, it's just,
is that a solid piece?
It's a solid piece. And so to start off with a chunk of firewood and try to carve it into this shape is surprisingly difficult.
Yes.
You know.
I mean, I can only imagine the number of cuts that were made. you know, this way, this way, this way, this way, this way. Just try, and then the
Right.
progression. How do you?
Mm-hmm.
Is this your first attempt?
First attempt.
Wow.
There's going to be 3 of them. I work in sets of 3s, and then that'll be and it's the 3 graces. And so, and now I'm just working with these tools.
Hand tools, yeah.
Yeah, until I can get it down to being what it's going to be. But it's so fun, sort of, to be humbled.
Mhm.
And I think artists need to have that humbling experience